At 5:12 on the 18th of April 1906, a magnitude about 7.8 rupture raced along roughly 477 kilometers of the San Andreas Fault beside San Francisco, producing right lateral surface offsets that reached about 6 meters near Point Reyes and Olema. The main shock shook for close to a minute, with peak intensities in the city reaching the upper end of the modified Mercalli scale as unreinforced masonry collapsed, chimneys failed, and street rails kinked. The city's lifeline snapped in seconds as hundreds of water mains and gas lines ruptured, leaving hydrants dry and leaking fuel everywhere. More than 30 independent fires ignited within hours, and westerly winds helped merge them into a firestorm that burned for roughly 3 days. The burn scar ultimately covered about 12.2 square kilometers and consumed on the order of 28,000 buildings across more than 500 city blocks. Official early counts listed hundreds of fatalities, but later reassessments placed the death toll well above 3,000, making it the deadliest urban disaster in California history. Around 225,000 residents, over half the city, were displaced into makeshift camps in parks, beaches, and military grounds. Insurance policies at the time typically covered fire but excluded quake, which created perverse incentives and complicated claims for thousands of property owners. Fire Chief Dennis Sullivan suffered fatal injuries early in the event, depriving response efforts of their most experienced leader at the worst possible moment. With hydrants failing across key districts, city officials and Army units resorted to dynamite to cut fire breaks, but untrained blasting frequently ignited fresh blazes that leapt across streets. Market Street, graded through dunes in the 1850s and built to a width of about 36.6 meters over a length of roughly 5.6 kilometers, became a corridor of twisted rails and collapsed facades within hours. The famed ferry building at the foot of Market survived structurally, but the commercial blocks behind it were gutted by successive fire fronts. Steel frame buildings generally fared better against shaking, yet post-fire heat shattered windows, weakened members, and forced later refitting. In the western addition, wood frame houses that rode out shaking were later lost to advancing flames that hopped block to block via radiant heat and embers. Residents formed bucket brigades, where isolated patches of water pressure remained, but the scale of rupture made sustained firefighting impossible outside a few lucky nodes. On Nob Hill, mansions that symbolized Gilded Age wealth were reduced to shells as heat spalled stone and warped ironwork in minutes. Across the city, thousands queued for rations, while medical tents treated crush injuries, burns, and smoke inhalation with scarce supplies and overworked staff. The U.S. Army organized major relief arteries along Van Ness Avenue and the Presidio, distributing food, policing cordons, and assisting with demolition to steer fires into sacrificial corridors. Troops and volunteers leveled selected structures along Van Ness to form a break that, combined with shifting winds, finally helped halt the western advance. Inspection tours down Market documented cable slots jammed with debris, scorched streetcar bodies, and pavements buckled by both faulting and extreme fire temperatures. Street sweepers and teams with horse-drawn wagons began debris removal within days, prioritizing access to municipal buildings, ferry links, and hospitals. The greatest single urban lifesaver proved to be a single functioning hydrant near present-day Dolores Park, which helped protect the Mission District during a critical window. That golden hydrant still receives an annual April commemoration at dawn, maintaining civic memory of a rare working node in a paralyzed grid. Within a month, salvage crews were reclaiming bricks, iron, and timbers as entrepreneurs reopened shops in temporary sheds and along surviving corridors. The scale of homelessness spurred construction of more than 5,000 small wooden cottages, later nicknamed earthquake shacks, which families could rent to own and then move onto private lots. The catastrophe accelerated plans for a redundant high-pressure auxiliary water supply system that could draw from reservoirs and saltwater pumps, a network intended to keep hydrants alive despite future main breaks. City planners revised street widening proposals, fire break logic, and building codes to favor ductile materials, braced frames, and better separation of fuel sources from dense commercial cores. The disaster also transformed seismology as detailed field mapping, fault offset measurements, and tide gauge analyses created datasets that anchored modern elastic rebound theory. Regional effects reached well beyond San Francisco, as towns like Santa Rosa and San Jose recorded severe damage from the same rupture. Economic shocks rippled globally through insurance markets and gold flows, stressing firms and prompting new catastrophe underwriting practices. Footage taken just days before the quake shows markets' dense traffic of cable cars, horse wagons, and staged early automobiles threading chaotic intersections without signals. Days later, the same route became a study in negative space, with building footprints erased, facades peeled back to steel, and entire blocks reduced to brick and ash. Neighborhood topography influenced fire behavior as slopes funneled wind and embers uphill, turning rows of Victorians into fire ladders that advanced flame fronts toward ridgelines. Van Ness Avenue, approximately 38 meters wide and aligned roughly north-south, became both a demolition line and a logistics spine for relief convoys. In the weeks that followed, the city hauled millions of kilograms of debris to the waterfront in low areas, using rubble as fill that subtly reshaped parts of the shoreline. Ferry links across the bay enabled a commuter-style relief pipeline, as goods and labor flowed through the surviving terminal, while tracks and tunnels elsewhere were repaired. The 1906 catastrophe taught San Francisco that earthquakes punish brittle systems long after shaking stops, because broken pipes, fractured command, and misaligned incentives can turn a seismic disaster into a man-made inferno. The same event taught that redundancy in water supply, disciplined explosives use, practiced interagency command, and clear public communication can convert a city's worst day into a faster, safer recovery. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it and subscribe to the Wiki USA channel. Do you know how the names of 55 American cities came to be? What was Atlanta originally called, and which world-famous city once carried the long name El Pueblo de Nuestra Señora la Reina de Los Angeles del Rio Porciúncula? Visit go.wikiusa.org/cities to learn more.